The flames roared. Prisoners screamed as they were shoved alive into the crematorium ovens. One man stood watching with a twisted smile on his face. SS officer Erich Muhsfeldt, the sadistic monster who would burn hundreds of thousands of innocent people during World War II. This is the chilling story of one of history's most depraved killers and how justice finally caught up with him. If this story sends chills down your spine, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for timeless words. Because we bring you the most shocking untold stories from history that you won't find anywhere else. Let's dive in. Liberation reveals the horror. The darkness of night hung heavy on July 22, 1944, when Soviet soldiers of the Red Army pushed through German-occupied Poland and stumbled upon something that would shake the world to its core. Majdanek concentration camp. This became the first major Nazi death camp to be liberated, and what the soldiers discovered inside would expose the full scope of Nazi Germany's unimaginable evil. Soviet officials immediately summoned journalists from around the world to witness the evidence firsthand. The reporters walked through the gates and confronted scenes that defied human comprehension. Mountains of shoes, piles of human hair, gas chambers still reeking of death, and crematorium ovens filled with charred human remains. As Allied forces continued their advance across Europe in 1944 and 1945, they liberated camp after camp, each revealing fresh horrors. On January 27, 1945, Soviet troops liberated Auschwitz, the largest and most notorious extermination center in the entire Nazi killing machine. Between 1940 and 1945, a staggering minimum of 1.3 million human beings were transported to Auschwitz like cattle to slaughter. Of those, at least 1.1 million never left alive. They were systematically murdered in what the Nazis called the final solution. Among the architects of this genocide was a man named Erich Muhsfeldt, whose sadism exceeded even the horrific standards of the SS. The making of a monster. Erich Muhsfeldt entered the world on February 18, 1913, in Neubrück, a town in the German Empire. Nothing about his early life suggested the monstrous path he would choose. After completing 8 years of elementary education in 1927, he learned the trade of baking. He married, fathered a son, and appeared to lead an ordinary life, until darkness consumed him. Everything changed on January 30, 1933, when Adolf Hitler seized power as Germany's Chancellor. That same year, Muhsfeldt joined the SA, the Nazi stormtroopers who terrorized political opponents. In 1937, he transferred to the notorious SS, and 2 years later became an official member of the Nazi Party. His transformation from baker to butcher was complete. When Nazi Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, World War II exploded across Europe. By January 1940, Muhsfeldt had joined the SS Division Totenkopf, the dreaded Death's Head units. These elite Waffen-SS troops wore the skull and crossbones symbol on their collar as a badge of terror. Founded in 1934 by Theodor Eicke, these units had one primary purpose: administering the concentration and extermination camps where millions would perish. The Death's Head units received special training in brutality and cruelty. They were taught to view prisoners not as human beings, but as enemies of the state who deserved extermination. They became the willing executioners of Hitler's final solution, the systematic genocide that would murder 6 million Jews and millions of others. Auschwitz and Majdanek, where evil took root. In August 1940, Muhsfeldt arrived at Auschwitz concentration camp, where he served as head of prisoner work details and block leader. Even in that hellish place, his reputation for savage cruelty began to grow. In November 1941, Muhsfeldt transferred to Majdanek concentration camp near Lublin, Poland, where he assumed control of the crematorium. His job? Burning the bodies of murdered prisoners. During the winter of 1941 to 1942, camp authorities began experimenting with Zyklon B poison gas to murder prisoners deemed too weak for forced labor. By October 1942, mass gassing operations were in full swing, continuing until late 1943. Majdanek contained at least 3 gas chambers. Shower rooms reconfigured for mass murder. Tens of thousands of Jews arrived at the camp, either dying from the deliberately brutal conditions designed to work them to death or being gassed when they could no longer perform slave labor. Operation Harvest Festival. Industrial-scale murder. Muhsfeldt played a central role in one of the Holocaust's largest single massacres. Operation Harvest Festival. In late October 1943, Jewish prisoners were ordered to dig long, deep trenches, supposedly for air defense purposes. But the prisoners knew the truth. They were digging their own mass graves. On November 3 and 4, 1943, approximately 43,000 Jewish prisoners were systematically murdered at 3 camps: Majdanek, Poniatowa, and Troniki. The condemned were forced to strip naked and walk into the trenches they had dug. Execution squads waited at each trench. The prisoners were ordered to lie down, then shot in the back of the neck. Loudspeakers blasted music at full volume to drown out the gunfire and screams. This remains the largest single massacre of Jews carried out by German forces during the entire Holocaust. The sadist of the crematorium, Erich Muhsfeldt, wasn't just following orders. He reveled in the suffering he inflicted. This twisted sadist celebrated whenever he murdered an especially large number of people in a single day. He stayed perpetually drunk and carried a thick wooden club, which he used to beat prisoners unconscious for no reason whatsoever. Witnesses described how Muhsfeldt once noticed a prisoner smile at a passing wagon driver. Muhsfeldt immediately walked over and punched the prisoner in the jaw, knocking him to the ground. Then he kicked the helpless man repeatedly all over his body, stomping out 3 of his teeth. On another occasion, Muhsfeldt beat a prisoner with his fists until the man collapsed. Not satisfied, he grabbed a shovel handle and jammed it down the prisoner's throat, then walked away, leaving the man to die in excruciating agony. As head of the crematorium, Muhsfeldt would randomly approach prisoners and tell them with sadistic glee, "I'm going to get you soon, and I'm warning you. I'm going to burn you alive." This wasn't an empty threat. One young Polish woman in her late 20s learned she was scheduled for the gas chamber. When she realized she was about to die, she fought back desperately, scratching Muhsfeldt's face and screaming, "Why am I to die?" Muhsfeldt screamed back, "You will be burnt alive." He ordered her hands and feet bound, then had her tied to the metal trolley used to load corpses into the crematorium ovens. The young woman was pushed into the roaring flames while still breathing, her screams echoing through the death factory. Long queues of condemned prisoners often formed outside the crematorium, waiting to be hanged on metal hooks mounted on the wall. Their corpses would then be fed into the ovens. Muhsfeldt's henchmen selected victims from among the weakest prisoners on days when not enough people had died naturally. They needed to maintain consistent mortality rates. The children's executioner. Perhaps Muhsfeldt's most depraved acts involved children. Multiple witnesses testified that he took particular pleasure in throwing Jewish children, some mere toddlers, into the gas chambers. Jerzy Lang, a Holocaust survivor, described watching Muhsfeldt heading toward the crematorium carrying 2 small Jewish children in each hand. Moments after Muhsfeldt entered the building, Lang heard gunshots. To mask the sound of these executions, guards would start up a truck engine parked beside the crematorium. When the Red Army liberated Majdanek on July 24, 1944, they found the camp virtually intact. Fewer than 500 Jewish prisoners remained alive. Between October 1941 and July 1944, somewhere between 80,000 and 120,000 human beings perished at Majdanek. Returned to Auschwitz. In May 1944, Muhsfeldt returned to Auschwitz, where he supervised the crematoria at Birkenau during the liquidation of Hungarian Jewry. Birkenau was the largest subcamp in the Auschwitz complex and served as the primary extermination center. Hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews were transported to Auschwitz in 1944 in one of the Holocaust's final massive killing operations. In the crematorium, Muhsfeldt's work squads were seen beating women to death with metal rods. Muhsfeldt's specialty was striking prisoners across the back with his whip. Multiple survivors reported that he wore a smile on his face when victims who disobeyed orders were shoved into the fiery furnaces. Sometimes while still alive, Dr. Miklos Nisli, a Hungarian Jewish prisoner forced to work as a doctor at Auschwitz, witnessed Muhsfeldt's coldness firsthand. After Muhsfeldt executed 80 prisoners by shooting them in the back of the head, he came to Dr. Nisli complaining of high blood pressure. When the doctor suggested the mass execution might have caused his elevated blood pressure, Muhsfeldt angrily snapped that it made no difference to him whether he killed 1 prisoner or 80. In an extraordinarily rare occurrence, a 16-year-old girl survived the gas chamber. Dr. Nisli begged Muhsfeldt to spare her life. Muhsfeldt refused. To ensure the girl died, he personally shot her in the back of the neck. Final atrocities and capture. In August 1944, Muhsfeldt was transferred to frontline combat, participating in the battle for Hungary. After being wounded, he was sent to Flossenburg concentration camp in early April 1945. Shortly after Muhsfeldt arrived, the camp was evacuated as Allied forces closed in. During the death march that followed, Muhsfeldt was seen shooting dozens of prisoners who were too weak, sick, or exhausted to continue walking. For all his crimes against humanity, the Nazi regime awarded Erich Muhsfeldt the War Merit Cross Second Class, justice served. When World War II ended in May 1945, Muhsfeldt was captured by Allied forces. In January 1947, a U.S. military court sentenced him to life imprisonment. But Poland demanded his extradition to face justice for his crimes on Polish soil. The Auschwitz trial began in Krakow on November 24, 1947, lasting 1 month. 41 defendants stood accused of crimes against humanity. During the war, Muhsfeldt had once told a Polish political prisoner with contempt, "If you Poles weren't such fools, we wouldn't have to burn you in crematoria." But in the end, it was the Polish Supreme National Tribunal in Krakow that found him guilty and sentenced him to death by hanging. On January 24, 1948, at Monolupich prison in Krakow, Erich Muhsfeldt mounted the gallows. He was 34 years old. The executioner placed the noose around his neck, the same neck he had used to bark orders that sent hundreds of thousands to their deaths. When the trapdoor opened, justice was finally served. After his execution, Muhsfeldt's body was donated to medical students at the University of Krakow as anatomical study material. According to Dr. Niesley's account, Muhsfeldt's wife was killed in an Allied bombing raid, and his son was sent to fight on the Eastern Front. No tears were shed for Erich Muhsfeldt when he died. The world was better for his absence. This is Timeless Words, where we never forget history's darkest chapters so they can never be repeated. If this story impacted you, smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another shocking true story from history. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this important history. Drop a comment below telling us what aspect of this story shocked you most. Remember, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Until next time, stay informed, stay vigilant, and never forget.